Hey guys, it's Maciek from Goliath Off-Road, and this time we got a Land Rover. So as you guys can see, we have this 2001 Land Rover Discovery 2, and it's in pristine condition. It's all stock, rust-free, and this one is equipped with the only engine option available in the United States, which is the V8 version. And we want to do, starting with this episode, a quick build series on this Land Rover to show you guys how we imagine a Overland Discovery 2 build. In this episode, we'll be focusing on installing a suspension lift on a Land Rover from Terafirma, so let me show you what's in the boxes. Alright, so let's see what we got here. Shocks. Another one. Beefy springs, looks to be instructions, and spring isolators, upper and lower. Also, they provided new hardware. We don't need that anymore. Now moving to the other box. All right, out of the way. All right. It looks like we have the same thing, just for the front tracks again, and nice springs. Don't need that anymore. Another shock, and another spring with instructions. Okay, we will start with taking some measurements of the factory ride height to see how much we'll gain. So let's go. Looks like we have 32 3/4 of an inch on the front fender. To the back. On the back we have exactly the same, 32 3/4. For this install, you can use jack stands, or like we do, you can use a 2-post lift and safety lift the vehicle. We will start with taking the wheels off, and as you guys can see, the lug nuts on this Land Rover are pretty massive, so we will be using size 27 jumbo socket for that, and let's get to it. So before we start with anything, we put axle stand under the axle to secure it, and now we can move on to unbolting those 2 shock lower bolts, and this is size 13, so let's get to it. So next thing we will do is to lower the axle so we can remove the springs, and they should come right out. After lowering the axle, it's time to remove the spring, and by lowering the axle it freed up the spring a little bit, as you can see. So it's time to remove this mount, and you have to lift up the shock or compress it a little bit, so it's easier to remove the spring, just like that. And the spring should come right out. While we remove the spring, let's go to the other side and do the same thing. So to completely remove this shock, you're going to unbolt 4 bolts. Those are 30mm bolts, and they hold this cylinder. And on top of this, there is 80mm bolt that you have to remove to completely remove the shock, and then it should slide right out. So once you remove that old shock, you can go ahead and clean up maybe some crust that might be built up there, and let's go ahead and check up the new stuff. So there's a comparison between the old spring and the new spring, and just looking at them, there is barely any difference lengthwise. You can see that the new one is much thicker, much stronger, and has nice gray powder coat. Alright, so we already installed the upper shock mount because it's just a little bit more inconvenient to get to, and now we can tighten this bucket with those bolts, reuse the stuck spring bracket, and tighten those bolts. So let's start with reinstalling this. So it will slide right here. Right here. I have wiggled it a little bit, like so, and just reuse the factory bolts. Those are the 30mm bolts. Alright, so once you tighten those bolts, you may continue with sliding the springs up, and this is going to be probably a little bit more difficult than taking it out because the shock is longer. So you may have to just wiggle it a little bit like this. So once you got your wheels reinstalled, you can take off this jack from underneath the vehicle, like this, and just like that we're gonna move on to the back. So like the front, you want to start with removing the wheels. So starting for the back, first you want to remove the shock, and for that, for both upper and lower nut, you will use 80mm wrench or socket like this. And so let's get to it. As you can see, we already removed the shocks, so now what we have to do is lower this axle stand, so the axle lowers and we can safely remove the springs. So because the radius arms are still connected, we're gonna have to use pry bar to pry on the spring and try to remove it, like this. And just like that, it's out. We already removed everything from the back, and right now we are left with this lower spring perch, and it looks okay. I'm not sure if we need that, but Terafirma decided to provide this part, so right now we're gonna install it. So you take your 13mm wrench or socket and just unbolt it. And once you unbolt it, don't forget to save the stuck hardware to reuse it with the new parts. Now we will take this lower spring perch and place it where the old one was. Make sure it's straight and reuse those bolts. So just a quick comparison between old and new. So as you can see, they look pretty much all the same. You have tighter coils on the upper end, and as you can see, this is toast. So that's why they provided us with the new ones, and we're gonna install them just like that on top. So as you can see, the spring is finally in. It was a little bit too long than we thought, and we had to use some spring compressors and compress it a little bit, and then we used some pry bar and mallets to get it in place. So let's just do it on the other side right now. So as you can see on the time lapse, we have the other spring in, and right now we can focus on reinstalling the shocks. And so these are the shocks that we will be using, and just like the old ones, we will be reinstalling those 80mm bolts for the upper and lower mount. So let's get to it right now. Okay, we have both springs and shocks installed, and looks like we are done with everything on the rear. So let's lower the axle stand and put the wheels back on and see how it looks like. Well, looks like we are all done with the lift key install, so let's go ahead and lower it down and see how much lift we gained. Let's do the final measurements and see what we got. So on the front we have right 36 inches. So on the front we gained right about 3 inches, maybe 3 inches with some change. And on the back there is 35 3/4, so we gained 3 inches. Well guys, we got to the end of episode 1 of our Land Rover Overland build. Right now it's lifted, we got even more lift than we thought we would, which is very nice. And up next will be wheels and tires, and we already got the tires for it, but we would like to hear your opinion on what wheels we should get for it. You know, what size, what brand, what color, and let us know in the comments what you think, and give us a like, subscribe, and we will see you in the next one, so stay tuned.